So good afternoon, everyone. As most of you would be aware, myself Dibangshu, and I run the Investor Relations and Mergers and Acquisition Practices at NH. On behalf of the company, I welcome you all to the Q2 FY22 and thereby H1 FY22 earnings call of the company. To discuss our performance and address all your queries, as usual, today we have with us Dr. Rupert, our CEO, Mr. Viren Shetty, our COO, Mr. Keshav Venugopalan, our CFO, alongside Ashish Sukhija from the team. I am sure you have gone through the investor collaterals which have been uploaded on the stock exchanges as well as on our website day before itself. Before we proceed with this call, I would like to remind everyone that the call is being recorded and the transcript of the same shall be made available on our website at a subsequent date as per our usual practice. I would also like to remind you that everything that is being said on this call that reflects any outlook for the future or which can be construed as a forward-looking statement must be viewed strictly in conjunction with the uncertainties and the risks that they face. These uncertainties and risks are included but not limited to what we have already disclosed in our prospectus filed with SEBI before our initial public offer in late 2015 and subsequent annual reports on our website. Post the call, in case you have any further queries, please do feel free to get in touch with us. With that, I would now like to hand over the call to Dr. Rupert.
Good afternoon to all. With the effects of the second wave of pandemic subsiding, our Indian operations staged a decent recovery during the quarter gone by, after the significant impact as observed in Q1 FY22. For the period Q2 FY22, we are pleased to report record profitability with consolidated EBITDA of 1.81 billion and PAT of almost 1 billion INR. This has been possible on the back of recovery in Indian operations, aided by our international ventures at Cayman Islands and the hospital project management at St. Lucia. Overall, our balance sheet and liquidity profile remains strong with 5.6 billion INR of gross borrowings and consolidated cash and liquid investments of 3.2 billion INR as on 30th September 2021. Our Indian business adjusted for the vaccine revenues while growing 63% year on year due to the base effect, translating to a 12% quarter on quarter growth, registered an EBITDA margin of 13.1% during the period against 8% registered in the previous quarter. There was an all-round revival in business across the network, with new COVID cases waning across the country post the aftermath of the second wave, which had significantly affected the operations in the previous quarter. Our non-flagship hospitals continue to build upon its momentum of previous quarters, with the group of hospitals, excluding the 3 new hospitals in Jammu, registering an EBITDA margin of 18.8% during the quarter, thereby continually improving upon its profitability over the quarters. We are also encouraged by the improving profitability trends at our 3 newer hospitals across NCR and Mumbai, with the losses having reduced significantly despite the pandemic-induced disruptions. It's indeed heartening to note that these hospitals across the network have not only held the ground during these uncertain times and have been leading the business revival across the group since the onset of the pandemic. Recovery at our flagship hospitals has been slightly muted given the significant erosion in international patient mix, as well as high-end cardiac sciences-based elective work, which was key footfall drivers at these centers of excellence. Thus, profitability of this category, especially our Health City Bangalore hospitals, remain affected as compared to the pre-COVID times. We continue to work on improving upon this over a period of time, with the sentiments improving all around, thus facilitating people's mobility across regions. Moving on to our overseas operations, despite a couple of hurricanes, namely Grace and Ida, impacting the region, our unit at Cayman Islands reported operating revenues of $19.7 million in Q2 FY22, resulting in an EBITDA of $8.3 million. Thus, for the 6-month period ending 30th September 2021, the unit delivered a healthy $19.1 million of EBITDA with a PAT of $15.9 million. Separately, our hospital management project at St. Lucia contributed to 215 million INR to the group's EBITDA during the quarter. We remain confident in this regional business emerging as a strong pillar of our future growth. As regards our continuing focus on various digital initiatives, we have now integrated doctors' mobile applications with ICU monitors for real-time remote monitoring assessment to enhance the clinical efficiencies across the network. We have recently also launched a pilot project called Enhanced Doctors Bay Management System for outpatient queue management to ensure transparency and predictability in service delivery. On the clinical front, we continue to deliver advanced super specialty work as reflected in the work across our oncology, surgical oncology and medical oncology, as well as very high-end advanced image-guided therapies and the cardiac program across the entire network. Some of the highlights has been a rare case of a selective dorsal rhizotomy for a child with severe spasticity. This was done to relieve the spasticity. And also we have been doing very high-end complex neonatal congenital heart surgeries in our Howrah unit with a very complex procedure called selective brain perfusion or cerebral perfusion. And the Gurugram unit also has been doing minimal access surgeries for cardiac procedures, for valve surgeries, and this has been a trend across the entire network as well. And Guwahati has also been doing an image-guided therapies for abdominal bleedings. In general, they would have had to undergo major surgeries by themselves. This has been dealt with by an image-guided therapy, similarly in the cath lab. Looking ahead, with the vaccination coverage expanding by the day, we are hopeful that business activity will resume its pre-COVID growth trajectory. At the same time, we remain vigilant over the developments taking place globally with regards to any fresh wave of COVID infection, to prepare ourselves accordingly in case of any further disruptions. Notwithstanding the near-term COVID-19 related uncertainties, we remain confident about our business prospects by continuing to focus on delivering quality, affordable healthcare to all. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Rupert. With that, I think we can open the floor for Q&A. I would request the participants to use the feature of raising their hand in Zoom, and then one by one we can probably get down to seeking the questions from those participants and follow it up with answers from the management. Yeah, I see a raised hand from Yash Tanna. Yash, you can go ahead. You can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yeah. Good afternoon, team. My first question is related to the potential oversupply of beds situation in the Cayman Islands. So Cayman, I think they already have enough beds to fulfill the current needs, and with our expansion coming up, and we know that another listed peer is also setting up a project in Cayman. So would this lead to a potential oversupply of beds, and would it decrease the prices and margins for procedures in Cayman?
I'll answer this one. If you just look, if you treat all beds the same on the raw number of beds that are available in Cayman, yes, you can call it as an oversupply, but that doesn't get to the truth. The fact is no two beds are the same. Essentially what you're talking about is the beds used for treating different kinds of treatment modalities. So the expansion that we are looking into is not so much about adding beds as it is about adding clinical specialties that aren't being taken care of by our hospital and the other hospitals on the island. So this is high-end cancer care, emergency care, neonatal care, very advanced surgeries with robotics and so on. So when we add the new expansion and the facilities, there will not be a single specialty, barring some very advanced transplant and very advanced radiotherapy surgery like proton, which again, very few people actually require. Barring that, for 99% of everything that a person from Cayman is most likely to experience in their lives, we will be able to cover with our expansion. As for what it would be if another hospital were to come with a similar set of offerings and the related impact, yes, I mean, obviously there would be that huge impact, but you have to also understand the logistical challenges of doing that in the first place. Because so if you bring a cardiac surgeon on the island, for example, they're also going to understand that there is an existing cardiac surgery program. If you bring an oncologist or a radiotherapist, they're going to understand that the program is there. There simply won't be enough work to split for the third and fourth person to come on the island. So just logistically, it becomes very challenging. But yes, if you to overcome all of that and somehow run a duplicated facility, if someone else were to set it up, there would be a problem. But given that we have a significant legacy in the island, the brand that we have is extremely strong, and that patients have preferred our hospital over many, many years, it would definitely be margin erosive, but I would say much worse for someone else who's trying to start from scratch with the working capital losses they would face, and the fact that they would be starting on a much lower margin base for them to justify their investment.
Sure. Thanks for such a detailed explanation. The second question is relating to our oncotherapy. So since last 2-3 quarters, our oncology mix has been around 13% of sales, and now that we are adding onco blocks in all our hospitals, like most of hospitals, and so 2-3 years down the line, where do we see oncology as a therapy mix, which is 13% currently, and I suppose onco is a higher margin and a higher ROC than other therapies. So is that true? Can you give more light on that?
Dr. Rupert, you want to take this one?
Yeah, we've seen the biggest growth in the oncology services as a service, clinical service line after the cardiac services. It's growing very rapidly into a very prominent one. And we feel that it will continue to grow like that because all we have to do is add the necessary comprehensiveness of the care that includes radiation in all our facilities. So as we are doing that step by step, we will see this continuing to grow. And we have seen very good traction of not only medical oncology, but very high-end oncosurgical work and radiation oncology wherever we have put up those things. And for the comprehensiveness of that, we are adding the image-guided therapies as well, because that is also one of the another modality which is there. So that will be it will work along with the cardiac program because that needs a cath lab as well. So we are well equipped and we are equipping these centers for the sustained long-term growth of this specialty.
Sure, but do we have any targets in mind 2-3 years down the line? What number as a percentage of sales mix we want to reach, and is it more better on a unit economics level onco compared to other therapies?
Because all the other specialties also are growing, so I would see going in closer to the high. Closer towards closer to a 20% or something will be what we are seeing.
Sure. Thank you, Doctor.
Shantanu can come next.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Viren. Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. Firstly, I would like to, understand from you your outlook on international patients. How is the situation evolving, particularly with respect to Bangladesh? So that is my first question. And the second question is with respect to your India P&L. So the consumable expenses as a percentage of sales is now 28.1%. instead of the long-term average of around 25%. Now, I would have thought that since COVID is waning, this percentage would be 25% in the current quarter, but it has not been the case. So what has been the issue, and going forward in the subsequent 2 quarters and in FY23, what would this percentage be? Thank you.
The outlook from Bangladesh, I'll address the consumable part a little bit, and Dr. Rupert can address the core problem with that later. The flights continue to be restricted. The flights had opened up for a bit, then there were restrictions again. The Bangladesh traffic has been coming to Bangalore and Calcutta, not as much as it was before. There are many reasons for it. It's just generally now much more difficult for people to get the medical visas, for people to get the confidence that traveling is safe. And so the total international volume or rather revenue-wise from 11-12%, it's crashed down to 1.5%. The question you asked of when it will recover, it's quite, it's very hard for us to predict. I think I would not be able to have any kind of confidence that we'll get back to previous levels unless there's no more COVID. But whether we reach some kind of accommodation, which is you'll always have an endemic levels of COVID, and international travel will account for that and still come. I think what may end up happening is the same thing that you're seeing in business travel and all other kinds of international travel. It's not going back to the same levels as was before, but those who are going, it's very important for them to do so. So within that, we're still taking this time to do a lot of outreach, to work with clinics in Bangladesh, to do as much online consulting as we can to line up the patients, and so that when they come, it's not they're not fresh cases. We've done all the work beforehand, and so it's a much more smoother experience than it was before. But honestly, for when it will happen, it can only happen when there's almost no COVID in either India or Bangladesh, and not sure how long that will take. You raised a very good point on the consumable expenses. The 28% is a very alarming figure for us as well as Now, it's caused by several things. One is the fact is a lot of material prices have gone up. That is one part of it, but it's not the entire part of it. Post-COVID, we did get a lot of high-end procedures. We did get a lot of high-end therapies and treatments from doctors, and they were preferring the original molecule. They're preferring the more expensive drugs in that case, which generally in times when we're not as preoccupied with other things, we're able to convince them on the benefits of using the generic and a lot of other options. But because a lot of our supply chain team and operations team are so occupied with growing the volume, they were not paying as much attention to the supply chain aspects, which keep needing to be reinforced from time to time. But this is something that we have been analyzing and we are aware, and we're looking to address and reduce. Rupert, anything else to add on this?
Yeah, see, I mean, COVID is not gone away. We still have COVID cases in all our units, though they may be in small numbers. So we cannot let our guard down. So COVID protocols, though that has been revised, still exist. So a lot of pre-existing, testing and a lot of protocols are still in place. And also, like Viren said, a lot of high-end procedures. So we've done almost close to 25 percutaneous valve implantations and things like that. So we know where the issues are, and we are working on it, and hopefully we'll get it under control in the next couple of quarters.
So I mean,
Shantanu, just to add on to what Dr. Rupert and Viren said, and just for everybody's information, the number of 28.4 is a consolidated number which includes the vaccine revenues and thereby the consumption towards vaccine. Yeah, so if excluding that simply, and we have provided those numbers, the 28.1 actually becomes 26%, which is the lowest across the last 3-4 quarters. So the other things, the other points that Viren and Dr. Dr. Rupert highlighted remains very valid, but additionally, simply adjusting from the top line, the 23 crores of vaccine revenues, and from our consumption, 20.5 crores of the consumption towards this, the vaccine consumption, the margin, the consumption as a percentage of revenue actually becomes 26%, which is still a percentage higher than our long-term average, which point is well taken, and that the reasons Viren and Dr. Rupert have already elaborated to.
Right. And okay, thanks for the explanation. That has been helpful. And on the international patients, any traction from other countries apart from Bangladesh, or is it very low?
It's very low. We're getting patients coming from Africa and so on, but the travel between countries going, usually Dubai is a big transit point. The difficulties with getting transit visas coming through and getting Indian visas as well is causing it not to be as convenient as it was before.
Okay, right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shantanu. I think the next question could be from the line of Charulata. Charu, you can go ahead.
Yeah, congrats on the good set of numbers. I have two questions. One about the Cayman EBITDA and PAT, And second, in terms of the Bangalore cluster, the profitability has sequentially increased very sharply. What are the reasons for that?
So I'll take the first one, Charu, that you said. The profitability for Cayman unit for this quarter is the EBITDA is 8.3 million, which translates to an EBITDA for the 6 months ended 30th September of 19.1 million, which is close to 45% margin. And PAT for the H1 period is 15.9 million to be precise, USD.
So there is a other income component.
There is a minimal other income of around $180,000 for each of these quarter periods. So for the half year ended 30th September, the other income is around $360,000, which roughly translates in INR terms to around 2.8 crores. And for this particular quarter, it's around $180,000, which is roughly 1.4 CR.
Okay. Yeah.
What was the other question?
About the Bangalore cluster, profitability improvement sequentially.
That is essentially driven by the slowing number of COVID and the return to the normal operations. It could have been faster. We're doing a lot of work in outreach and reaching out to patients to come and get their elective surgeries done. But essentially, this is more on the normalization trend. The big thing still missing is our international patients, because our flagships in Bangalore and Calcutta get a huge percentage from international. But we've been able to bring a lot of the volume from the nearby regions and people from the corporates and so on to get treated. So that's essentially what is driving it.
Okay. Do you think the profitability, like 18% EBITDA margin, is sustainable?
For the cluster as a whole, and we're only talking about Bangalore now, in the absence?
No. Yeah, okay. Bangalore and overall as a consolidated.
Viren, she's talking about the Concall number.
Oh, Concall numbers. See, I'm not seeing any large cost drivers that will take up a lot of the expansion, and the business transformation work that we're doing is essentially done with the goal of enhancing the yield without necessarily adding a lot of manpower cost associated with that. So rather than add greenfield capacity, a lot of what we're doing is changing the bed mix, getting more private, semi-private rooms, getting more high-end equipment, and doing high-end surgeries, which increase yield without that corresponding increase in the cost. So it won't. There will be a seasonal effect, no doubt, because so just to give an example, in this coming quarter, as of this month, Cayman has an outbreak of COVID. And so this was an island that has not had much COVID at all. Now, the island is 80% vaccinated, and not many people are requiring ventilation and so on, and people are just mildly sick. And there is a very large government hospital that is able to take care. So we're not very alarmed as of now. But once you add this also to the fact that end of year, most people in the Western Hemisphere postpone their procedures till after New Year's. So the time between Thanksgiving and end of Christmas, New Year's is when most the people are in holiday and they don't really get any elective procedures done. Q3 is always a weak quarter for Cayman. So that combined with COVID will have an outsized impact for this one quarter, but then it usually recovers by Q4. But if you tell me just on a general basis going forward, I think it's more or less the same. I won't venture that it will go drastically down or drastically higher, but I wouldn't say that there's anything causing alarm other than, of course, more COVID in India and this one seasonal impact, what will happen this month and next month.
Okay. Viren, you may want to highlight that this number of this quarter actually includes a one-time windfall profit of 21.5 crore from St. Lucia, which is probably not a recurring. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's essentially it. I'm assuming you net off all the one-time things. So we're doing a consultancy contract with the government of St. Lucia, and that contract is nearly over. There's one last payment due. Netting of that, if you just look on a like-to-like hospital performance basis, it is, as I said earlier.
Yeah. Okay. All the
So
best.
Charu, I hope you understood that from the Concall number, you need to net that thing off to arrive at the recurring sustainable profitability margin. So that's a one-time windfall thing, which won't be a recurring thing.
Right. Okay.
Sure. Thanks, Charu. I think the next question is from Manish Poddar.
Yeah,
Manish,
hi,
you can go ahead.
Hi, sir. Thanks for doing the call. So, just two questions. One is for, in Cayman, could you probably highlight, how many doctor clinics do we have now, and what is the plan there going ahead?
Sorry, Manish, how many doctor what?
Doctor clinics.
Oh, outside of the main thing that we have one clinic in the center of the city, but that clinic itself, we are expanding. So we set up a separate chemotherapy area there, and there is more space that we're looking at. So we have one other. We will be opening up one more. This is in the Grand Cayman. We run another much smaller clinic in this place called Cayman Brac, but that is very small. It's in the government center. It's just more for, the Indian equivalent would be a dispensary. But that is just useful for doing follow-up for a lot of the patients. But we definitely have a much more aggressive clinic rollout program. As and when our existing clinics get to a very sustainable level and they max out, we will be adding more clinics and looking at opportunities in different parts of the country.
So, let's say theoretically speaking, how many clinics can you have up there? So, let's say if you have 3 right now, 2 big, 1 small.
Yeah, to be honest, Manish, we're taking this more opportunistically. We haven't done a full study mapping of the whole island to figure out the areas. We have a good sense of which are the areas in which if you were to set up a clinic, where it would be, because there are few locations in the island where there are dense populations of people, and the commercial areas, it makes more sense to have the clinic located there. In terms of total number, it won't be a lot. Like, it's a very small island, and the mobility is pretty good over there. And this is more about deciding where you want to, it depends a lot also on the convenience of the doctors who are going to go there and convenience of the patients to go. So we're taking it every year. We look at about 1 or 2 clinics like that until we get around 4 to 5, and then we'll take a call from there whether any more start to make sense. Because the other thing is also learning as we go on the configuration. So the clinic that we initially set up in this place called Camana Bay actually ended up 3 times the size of what we originally planned. Because as we started building it and as the response became really good, we just started growing bigger and bigger. So just to give you an example, COVID testing, the RT-PCR testing. Unlike in India where you can get it done everywhere, in Cayman there are very few places where you can get the PCR test done. And ours is one of the places. So we've taken up dedicated space in our clinic just for doing the PCR test. And over there, it's doing very well because a lot of people come in, but it means this was a demand we did not foresee. And the initial plan for that space was to use it for doctor offices. Now we've had to rent more space just to do doctor office so that the PCR thing can be in that part. So we're taking it more opportunistically. It's not something we are preemptively made a plan to go 20 clinics all over for.
Got it. And my second question is, I think for the last 2.5 years, you've been putting some or a lot of effort on the digital front. So is this largely to do with, let's say, productivity or improving the efficiency, or if you could probably quantify, let's say on a broad number, how much of savings does that really yield into versus the investment which you've done? Any broad sort of number, let's say, because now it's been 2.5 years. So just wanted to understand, if you have done a 3-year project, what sort of capex did that entail, and what did you get in return from that? Thanks.
Yeah. No, I mean, Manish, you asked a very good question. Unfortunately, we don't have answers even internally, and even this is the biggest bane of contention between us and the technology team, in that the costs keep going up. We're extremely excited by all the opportunities that are presented by the digitization of all our processes, but it's impossible for us to calculate whether the gains that we were able to get were digital related or whether they would have come anyway. Just to give you an example, we changed and revamped our entire contact center operations. So we harmonized the multiple ways patients are able to reach out to us. Otherwise, before what was happening, some people would call our doctors directly, some people call the secretaries directly, some people call the front office, some people would call the call center, some people would send emails or WhatsApp or make queries through the website. And there was absolutely no way for us to know and keep track of this. So we harmonized it, put it in a central contact center. And now we have much better detail as to where the patients are all coming from. Now, because it is easier to track now, and because we made it more convenient for the patients, we don't know if it led to a 10%, 20%, or 30% increase in the number of inbound calls. We can tell you from now on going forward, and this is data we will start presenting as of this year. So from next financial year, we'll start giving you more data about how patients are actually reaching out to us. So this is part of the overall disclosure that we're making, where we're breaking up into the average revenue per patient. We talked about their clinical stay, ICU bed stay, and all of that, rather than just getting stuck on occupancy numbers. So we start getting the data out to you later. But the thing is, attribution becomes very hard, because the truth also is that this is table stakes by this point. You cannot run any modern corporation, not just in healthcare. You cannot run any modern corporation unless you have a robust digital strategy, unless you have a CRM, unless you have very good lead management software, unless your doctors, as in your workforce, is able to access all their tools digitally. This is the bare minimum that anyone has to be doing. So we're really playing catch up, to be honest. Compare us not to the other hospitals, but to all the other firms in other industries that are digitally forward. I would say we are far, far behind. So there is tremendous scope. And it will start to show in the numbers, but unless I do something what Apollo does, where I create a separate digital vertical, which we're not yet in the phase of doing, it'll be difficult for us to get digitally attributed revenue. But the results have been good. The responses are there. With the OPD just to give you an example, our OPD footfalls today are still not at pre-COVID levels, which is the number of people coming in physically visiting us in the hospital. But by and large, nearly all the hospitals except 2 that we have reached their pre-COVID revenue numbers on a monthly basis. So that at least I can attribute very clearly to the fact that patients now have different ways of reaching our doctors and getting the thing that they want from us without having to physically visit us. So that has decongested the OPD. It's done a lot of good work, and I can say at least that much is concrete proof that this whole thing is working.
Viren, just one small data point, if I can. So let's say annually, what is that one number if you are spending on the tech side? What would be, let's say, the percentage of sales? Would it be 15 crores, 20 crores? Just rough number. That'll be helpful. Thank you.
No, that's a good question. So if I include tech, including all of that, it'll be more than 20. It'll be around 15 to 20 crores. If I include the contact center operations, the spend on the IT, all the ERP licenses, everything else we're doing. But we can come back to you. I mean, Devanshu can come back to you on that.
Sure.
No worries. Thank you so much.
I mean, Manish, just to give you a sense, I mean, till last fiscal year, cumulative, we had spent around 50 CRs, and it was almost equally split between OPEX as well as the CAPEX part of it, the network software and everything part of it. Just to give you a ballpark sense of the investment that we have been able to make. The impact assessment obviously is going on, is a work in progress. And once we have robustness of data and confidence around the data, we'll surely come back to you and share with you the same, as Viren highlighted.
Sorry, I'm really sorry to harp on this. But you would have spent, let's say, 15 crores over 3 years, but you have spent 50 crores for this. So the incremental 35 is what you've said.
No. I said 50 crores was the cumulative number over till the last fiscal. Just a ballpark sense.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Manish. I think Samir Baisiwala has been raising his hand for some time. Samir, you can go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. A very good quarter. Just Viren, how are you thinking about the volume recovery going forward? I'm comparing your total discharges. Now I think you are roughly about 49,000 plus versus pre-COVID, what used to be 75,000. This is for India business.
Rupert, you want to start? And I can add anything. This is on the discharges and how we're looking at the volumes.
Yeah, if you look at the trends in the last month or so, the volumes are continuously going up. What discharges will, what we are seeing is the routine, the elective work for straightforward work have started to come in wherever there is confidence in the system, where there is no COVID and other things have started to come into the system. So as we move forward, we will keep seeing this rise in this number of discharges as far as that is concerned. And also, you would have seen that our the daycare procedures have also have gone up. So that only reflects the numbers that we are seeing in the medical oncology and the other daycare kind of cases that is happening there.
I guess my question is that, how far, are we from the, full-blown recovery in the domestic business? And if I can combine here, not only the volumes, but also say, the mix, cardiac used to be earlier 40%. We have improved, but we are still at 30. If I look at your ALOS, pre-COVID used to be 3.5. We are now at 4.6. So just how do you see the contours of recovery and what time frame do you think we are going to get back?
See, the ALOS will start settling down once certain COVID-specific protocols will be, toned down significantly, because we do want to make sure that the patients are not, even though we test them prior to surgery and prior to admission, prior to surgery, we don't want to, for any major work, we don't want them to land up having COVID after we have done the procedure, because that leads to short death. So we want to be, so we keep them. So the ALOS will start coming down once the confidence in the system and the COVID and all those things factors are, negated, then these things will start moving down. So that is not an issue. That will start settling down.
COVID being one, the other is also we're seeing the nature of the work has changed as well. A lot more complex procedures that we're doing, which anyway we were moving in the direction of. And so it could be that, the number of discharges of very bog standard procedures that, in basic cardiology, angioplasty and so on, will take a longer time to recover, but will be made up from the fact that we're doing a lot more high-end procedures. But we still want to get back to the old discharge numbers because that's what our infrastructure is built for. But we'll have to do very different things to get to those numbers again.
Okay, very clear. But let me just try once more. The economy is normalizing. Cases are a lot lower. If you exclude Kerala, actually we are having very low cases. Vaccination is very high. But our volumes are still, I would say, 30-35% below pre-COVID. So do you think it's realistic to expect that within the next couple of quarters you're going back up there? That's the question.
I think we will be very different from what it was pre-COVID. And I think for every sector, as the economy is normalizing, there are definitely more winners than losers, right? And there are certain behaviors that are irrevocably changed. Certain behaviors people have learned during COVID, which is, let's say, ordering stuff online. I think it will never go back to a pre-COVID level of ordering things online. If it is more now, it will continue to be more. So from our business, it would be that a lot of the things that we became known for, which is the emergency response, the vaccination, the intensive care, the very high-end procedures, I think that will grow and continue to develop. Whereas a lot of the other hospitals may see their volumes increase in the other smaller hospitals, the nursing homes and so on, they may see a permanently higher number of the regular standard procedures, what they are good in doing. So I'm not saying it'll happen. I very much, we're working overtime towards getting back to a pre-COVID demographics of the patient also. But there is an equal argument to be made about a situation which we may have permanently lost the lower end of the market, which is the low margin, low yielding procedures, and gained it in more complex procedures and people coming and staying longer and going for high-end treatment. Now, that is a theory, of course. I mean, this is just me planning for the absolute worst case scenario in that. But it could very much be that things do revert back to a pre-COVID state and we get back to doing the more standard procedure and the hospital OPDs get crowded once more and so on. In which case, yes, I think you can revert back to your models from 2019, but it still may be that we need a year or so to get a good sense of what the future for us looks like.
Okay, great. Very clear. My second question, Viren, is on the pricing environment. Now things have stabilized. Can you just share your thoughts, what's going on, for the cash patients and for the insurance patients?
Pricing has always been tough. This, it's one of the most competitive markets in the world for healthcare because there's such a large private sector. From the cash, what we do is we take annual price increases to account for all the inflationary costs that we've had to bear. And since our salary costs, especially for nurses and frontline workers, have gone up as a response to the sheer amount of risk that we made them take during the pandemic, a lot of those costs had to be passed on to the patients, and we're trying to do that while still remaining competitive. It's been difficult, but we'll make up the difference in volumes. With insurance companies, these are 2-year contracts, and those discussions are always filled with a lot of tension on both sides.
Sorry, missed your last line.
So cash, we pass on revise the rate every year in January. Insurance contracts are negotiated on 2-year contracts, but the insurance contract discussions are always very difficult and prolonged negotiations. So these things end up stretching beyond the 2 years, as and when they expire. So we have 4 major insurance companies whose contracts have expired. We're in discussions with them. Hopefully we'll close this in 2 to 3 years. If not, there are alternatives available, in which case customers pay the hospital and they collect the reimbursement later from the insurance company. So that does give the pricing power in that instance. But the major thing where all hospitals lose out on is in the government insured patients. CGHS, ESI, Ayushman, all the state and government schemes, where rates just never get revised. And I don't know if it'll ever happen anytime soon, but that's one thing that continues to be absolute margin erosion and gets worse every year when the wage inflation, price inflation goes up 7, 8, 9, 10%, and this thing still stays basically the same.
Yeah, thanks for this, Viren. So if I exclude the scheme patients for the other 2, which is cash and insurance, all the pluses and minuses and difficulties taken into account, I mean, is it fair to put 4 to 5% annual inflation, and how much have you affected already for the cash patients?
We still haven't closed. Still in November. We'll know only by January once the prices come in. The price increase, again, it's not a flat number. It's something so certain procedures we want to stay competitive on, such as our cardiac procedures. So the price increase will be very nominal, say 4 to 5%, what you said. There are other things that have been accompanied by huge amounts of increase in the price of the input material. So a lot of encore treatments, the chemotherapy drugs and so on, the price have gone up a lot. So those have price increases more in the 10 to 12% range. So it's a mixed bag of sorts. It's difficult for us to pin down what the total number would be. But yeah, we're able to cover at least the wage increase, cost increase, input price increase. We're able to cover that.
Okay, great. With your permission, if I can ask one last question, and that is, Viren, that there's so much of funding which is now available for health tech platforms and many things which are happening. Some of them are actually sticking, some may not, who knows. So the question here is, for your hospital business, do you see any form of disruption that may happen to your inpatient and outpatient businesses and that makes you vulnerable to these health tech platforms.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we're vulnerable to everything. We're vulnerable to other competitors, vulnerable to the startups. So a couple of the models that I find quite interesting, models that are getting funded now. So the previous generation was all telemedicine. There was a lot of that going on 5-6 years ago. And so we adopted it, and it took up with some success during the pandemic, but it wasn't as game changing as the VCs made you believe, because a lot of patients and doctors still prefer to do things face to face. It's a good introductory call for us to do these things, just like we're speaking now, you and I, but you very much like to meet me. And the only thing stopping us is you're having to wake up early to come to Bangalore or me flying to Bombay. So, so telemedicine is a good intro to what digital disruption this business will be. Things that are a lot more interesting now are companies that are getting wholeheartedly into actually doing the surgery. And so what they've started doing is aggregating different doctors, working with different small hospitals, advertising very aggressively online and saying, we'll do your piles, we'll do your hydrocele, we'll do your gallbladder surgery at some price. And Hrithik Roshan will come and say it's super safe, it's super taken care of, it's a very good experience. And a lot of patients are, choosing to get operated that way, which is very different. I've never imagined that you could consumerize these procedures in the way that they've proven it can be done. Now, not that we would end up doing any of those things or getting Hrithik Roshan to advertise for our surgery, but the lessons that we learn are essentially how they're reaching out to patients, how they keep those engagement models, how they deal with a lot of the inconveniences that we really have taken patients for granted. Like one thing one of these companies does is they send the car to pick up the patients. It's so convenient. It's just astonishing me that I didn't think about that, because when they're paying 2 lakh for a procedure, just a 300 rupee pickup to, bring them to the hospital would be such a convenience. And, we're thinking of something on those lines. Similarly, on the amount of follow-up that we get, has driven us a lot to invest in CRM. So to give you an example, the heart hospital in Bangalore gets 50 calls per day only for Dr. Shetty. And this goes to his assistant, and he's not able to take all the calls. And so he's able to call back some of them. He's not able to call back some of them. So 40% of those calls get lost. And each of those is a potential revenue source. And, multiply that by all the doctors in our network. And we're losing a huge amount of business just by virtue of the fact that we don't keep track of who wants to come to our hospital and get treated. And so it's driving us to put in a good, something like Salesforce that will allow us to much more be able to follow through with patients who've indicated that they would like to get treated in our hospital. So to the question you asked about health tech and all the things, like I don't think we have the DNA to be a health tech startup-ish sort of company, but there are fundamental lessons that they do, and they have much better insights about what consumers want that we can easily copy and adapt to our models and do it with much more success, because we don't need to lose money doing that. Whereas they have to spend a lot of money acquiring customers, building a brand, paying for Hrithik Roshan, and those sorts of things, which we won't need to do.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Samir. I guess the next question could be from Mr. Shailesh Kumar. Shailesh, you can go ahead. Shailesh, you there? Shailesh Kumar? Yeah, Shailesh.
Is something wrong
We
with
can't hear you, Shailesh. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Unmuted himself. Yeah, now, yeah. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So this is the first question, particularly to the north region. It is in line with the previous questions that are we on the pre-COVID level, particularly to two hospitals, one that Dhansila and the Gurgaon. Can you please explain how these two hospitals are doing?
We've exceeded our pre-COVID numbers for both hospitals.
And what about the Gurgaon losses? Are we losses, and how do we see the outlook for that business?
Debangshu, you want to take that? I didn't quite hear it.
No, so Viren is wanting to ask the Gurgaon losses and what's the outlook for that. I mean, as Viren mentioned, Sailesh, the losses these two hospitals particularly have far exceeded their pre-COVID revenues as well as the business traction in terms of both occupancies and discharges and all. And as far as the financials are concerned, while Gurgaon is on the brink of breaking even, but still short of that, while Dharamshila for few quarters now, as you guys are aware, is in the black. So put together, this two hospitals from the NCR region is actually in the black for a couple of quarters now, as you would have seen in our deck. Outlook wise, we remain fairly positive given that these are newer hospitals in newer geographies, and we do see potential for further runway in terms of the growth potential of these two hospitals.
Yeah, thanks. Just one last question, little bit on the accounting side. When I look at console number, it's 100 crore higher than the on the EBITDA side I'm talking than the standalone. So I understand the 50-55 crore out of that is from the Cayman Island. And what is the remaining 40-45 crore out of that?
Okay, so our console EBITDA number for this quarter is 181 crore, out of which India is 100 crore. And the balance 80 is accounted by 60 odd crores from Cayman and the 21 odd crores from St. Lucia as a one-time gain that we already referred to earlier in the call. And there is also a loss of around 1.7 or 1.9 odd crores from Chittagong separately, which is also accounted for in the 181 crore console number.
So when you're saying India number is 100 crore, standalone is 70 crore EBITDA. I'm just excluding the other income.
Yeah, but okay, yeah, because standalone, there are other businesses which are not part of the standalone NHL entity, which also operates hospitals, namely Mysore, Dharamshila, as well as our West Bank hospitals in the Calcutta region, which are not part of the main NHL standalone entity, but are separate subsidiaries, wholly owned subsidiaries of the standalone entity.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Shailesh. I guess the next line is from next question is from Parag Patankar. Parag, you can go ahead.
Thanks. This question is for Viren. So, Viren, it's really good to see the progress that you've made on the automation and digital initiatives over the last few years. I've been listening to your quarterly calls as well as the AGM discussions. So question there is, and I had asked a similar question last quarter's call as well. We've done a lot of work in terms of internal automation and digitization for workflows. But on the patient-facing side, we haven't seen much progress. And so you had said that there are some initiatives underway which should help us get there. So could you share the progress on that? So the reason I ask is, so you're on the right track saying that there is a certain amount of CRM that we need to do to make sure there's no leakage in terms of potential customers. But if you extend that thought and think of it as more of a patient life cycle management, a lot of our patients are essentially patients for life. So people who undergo cardiac or diabetes treatments, unfortunately, are going to have some kind of extended care for months or years. So how are we thinking of addressing those patients to sort of improve the productivity from our end and also reduce the patient friction in terms of their needing to come to hospital and so on?
Yeah. But I mean, all really good points. So our thinking on this is not finalized yet. Okay, so I'll say a couple of things, but this is not the final word on the matter, on how we've evolved. I mentioned earlier about the DNA that certain companies have, and I said that we cannot be like a startup.
because, give me 1 second, because we're built very differently. The kinds of people we have, the kinds of people we hire, the way we're oriented is very different. We had built an app, a patient-facing app called NH Care, and we worked very hard to get a lot of people to download it. We hired a lot of iOS and Android developers to build on that. But the sheer amount of effort and developer time, and as you no doubt would be reading, it's impossibly hard to hire good developers now. And the ones we have, we're holding on to for dear life. And every, time someone starts hinting that they're getting another offer, we start panicking a lot. So hiring software developer right now is an extremely difficult job. The sheer amount of time involved in building, developing, and maintaining these patient-facing apps, for us is always a question of trade-offs. Is time that we could have spent improving something else in operation? Is time that could have been spent in improving the e-prescription module? Or time that is desperately required to roll out the software developed in Cayman, which is such a huge component. Sorry. So we roll out the NHK. We try to get people to download it. There's a huge amount of reluctance from anyone to download the app. And the app that we made was a substandard experience, because it's not on par with anything that you could download from 1mg or Practo, because those guys have been added for years. We've only been added for a couple of months. So we decided that at this point, at least, we will strengthen our focus on the things that we're really good at and things that will lead to immediate yield. So rather than us putting more developer time into building a whole suite of apps that patients can use to book tests and so on, we can easily piggyback off the things that other people have already built. Rather than building the e-commerce infrastructure for sending medicines around, we would partner with other companies who are doing it anyway and get on a revenue share arrangement with them. Rather than build a patient-facing app that they would have on their phone for us to remind them to take their medicines and in order to buy things, we can just do a WhatsApp integration with that. So the core pieces of all of that we're building out. So that means we may, from a patient side, at this point have a very light presence, and there isn't much that you as a patient would be able to download from NH, whereas a lot of the focus we would have are on things that are used by a hospital, used by the doctors. It doesn't mean we're abandoning the space entirely. It just means that right now, given the shortage we have in resources, by resource I mean developer, there's no amount of money we wouldn't spend in doing this. But because it's very difficult for us to get developers, right now we've decided to focus our efforts on finishing up all the products that we currently have, making sure it's used by the hospital, by the doctors, by all of that. And for all the patient-facing things, we'll rely a bit on third-party applications, either through other startups we can work with or by implementing Salesforce everywhere. So it will allow us to at least track where the patients are coming from and be able to improve our lead conversion, improve the throughput, address the queries much faster, and be able to, drive revenue in the more conventional way, rather than go after digital revenue, which, will take a lot of time.
Fair enough. So I think that's a great way to think about it. So I'm not asking sort of in terms of building a slick app that will compete with the best-in-class health tech apps out there. What I'm asking is sort of a more...
Name is Samir Baisiwala, Morgan Stanley.
Samir, would you mind muting your line, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Parag.
Right. So I was thinking more in terms of, just the whole thought process of digitizing that whole patient life cycle management. See, right now it's still patient driven. Essentially, the patient gets an appointment, patient turns up. So it's not a function of the app. It's essentially how we are thinking about tapping the entire set of contact points with the patient and being sort of proactive in guiding the patient towards what needs to be online and what can be offline. Is there some kind of thought process around that?
Most of those are online, but they're going in a very disparate manner right now. At least with the CRM, we can integrate all of that into one place. So why we were interested in an app strategy was because we could combine all the different ways that patients are reaching out to us. Through website, through the phone, through WhatsApp, through email, through directly contacting us into this one central place where all of these would happen, and then it'll be relatively easy for them to reach us and for us to reach them. So that was the fundamental premise of the app. And the app is still there and people are still downloading it. It's just that it's taking much longer than we thought, and it needs a lot more resources for us to popularize it, and developers to build on that. So that's why our focus is decided, at least we'll build out a lot of the smaller integrations. So for example, integrating online payment options. So it took us, the developers, rather than building more UI features to the app, they worked on integrating this Razor Pay, so that you can use at different parts of the hospital, pay through the UPI, pay through Razor Pay online, and they can have a completely contactless experience in the hospital. So that is a convenience in the hospital. But we can't extend that right now to them being able to pay for services at home in advance for some, like sending medicines at home. That part we won't be able to attract right now. But the things that we're already good at doing and things that patients are experiencing, we've made it much more convenient for them. But your larger point is true, in that we definitely are aware that a lot more of these things have to be more patient facing. And there's a whole realm of digital health that should be unlocked. And for that, we're running a separate program with our clinics rather than with the hospitals, because the clinics are a lot more smaller and focused, and we'll be able to spend a lot more time understanding the consumer behavior there. But from a hospital perspective, there's just so much more. So just, I don't have any real facts to back this up, but I would posit that there is an entire other NH worth of revenue sitting already in our existing system that we're not able to tackle because of our relative inefficiencies. Through the medicine fulfillment that we're not able to do because the pharmacies are crowded, through all the calls who come to our call center who are not able to get through every patient in our neighborhood who would like to come to our ER but doesn't know the number of the ambulance or is not able to reach out to us, through every doctor who does 2 surgeries a day but could do 1 additional surgery or 2 additional surgeries, if only they were able to line up the patients on the same day. There are all these inefficiencies within our system that are much cheaper to do, much faster to do, and easier to roll out, which would lead to tremendous gains without us going after new things. And not that we wouldn't do it, we absolutely are doing that. But these are things that are right there. It's in our grasp.
Sure, thank you very much. So I look forward to hearing about those initiatives in the coming quarters.
Anything else?
Charu, do you have any further question? I'm not sure. Charu, do you have any further question? I see your hand raised. I guess that's by mistake, Virena. Anyways, I guess that concludes our session for the day. Thanks again, everyone, for your active participation, just like every time. We look forward to any further queries, like I highlighted right at the outset. Should you have any such queries, do reach out to us. We'd be happy to address it to the best of our abilities. Thanks once again.